At this point, you've learned all of the foundational steps to build a flow. You know how to pull data in, clean it, combine it, transform it, and send it somewhere useful. Building a flow is about getting the data sources and the logic right. Operating a flow is about making that logic reliable, legible, and repeatable. To truly operationalize a flow, there are a few final actions and concepts you need to understand. This marks the shift from, I built this thing with AI, but I don't really understand how it works, to truly understanding a workflow and feeling confident enough in it to share that with your teammates and know that they'll actually understand what's going on in that flow. To get you there, the goal of this lesson is to teach you how to document, troubleshoot, share, and schedule your flow. Let's break down each one step by step. First, let's talk about documentation, because it's really hard to troubleshoot or share a flow that isn't easy to follow and understand. Now, as Parabola adds steps to the canvas, it does quite a good job already of adding steps that are well documented that make the flow easy to follow. But when you're operationalizing a flow, I would recommend circling back, giving steps more specific names, and adding things to cards if it'll help group similar blocks of logic together, and also give you an opportunity to add the why behind certain sections of logic. For example, I might want to put one of our send steps on a card where I explain what happens once this email is actually sent. I can go ahead and right click and hit add card, and then drag and drop a step directly onto that card before I go ahead and add some documentation. As you can see, I gave that card some color and emoji, threw some bullets in there to really explain what happens to this data downstream. The question you should be asking yourself is this process well documented enough that when I come back to it in a couple months, it'll be easy for me or a teammate to understand exactly what's happening step by step? Now, worst case scenario, if the documentation isn't perfect, you can also always come in and ask Parabola, hey, what is this flow doing? It's going to give you a description, and then you can ask Parabola questions about the data and the process and logic as well. Now that we've talked about documentation, let's talk about troubleshooting. Sometimes when your flows run, you might get an email because that flow failed or partially failed. At the bottom of these messages, you'll always see a description of what exactly that error was. And if we look at the canvas, you'll always see a red wrench next to whichever step failed. Whenever you see one of these errors, go towards it and you'll see a helpful error message that describes exactly what's wrong. If I double click here, you'll see that I forgot to fill out a field. So we can come in here, fill out an email address, adam@parabola.io, update our results, and that will eliminate the error. And as we return to the canvas, we can see that the wrench has been removed. If you run into an issue and you're not sure how to fix it, the first thing I'd recommend you do is ask Parabola, and it can often diagnose the issue and actually fix it immediately. The other approach that you can use for better understanding your data and the root cause of an issue is to take an ID or a record and follow it step by step. That might involve opening a step that has an error, going ahead and copying one of the IDs, and then working backwards in your flow, searching for that ID, looking for the columns, and tracking what the root cause issue actually was. Once your workflow is documented, you've troubleshooted any errors, you're ready to ultimately share it with the team to enable collaboration. You can do that by hitting this share button in the top right corner, and you can either share with your entire team, giving everyone editor or viewer access, or you can share with just specific individuals and assign their permissions at a granular level as well. Sharing with your team is super useful for not only letting teammates contribute to your flows, but also to give them visibility into how a process actually works and make them confident in the output. If you ever get questions around, hey, how is this calculated? How can we pull the data? You can point to your flow as an artifact that defines exactly how that process works. Finally, to truly put a flow on autopilot, we can set up triggers so that the flow runs automatically. This usually happens once we swap static input files for live integrations and we validated that the logic and the outputs are exactly what we're looking for. As we hinted at in the last lesson, you can access schedules and triggers by clicking this lightning bolt, and the simplest to configure is going to be a recurring time-based schedule, such as every weekday at 8 a.m. or as frequently as every 10 minutes. Now we'll go deeper on other trigger options in 201 and 301 courses, but you can also set up email triggers which tell the flow to run every time it receives an email, which is great for things like parsing PDFs and cleaning CSVs from third parties. And you can also set up things like webhook triggers, which tell this Parabola flow to run whenever a third-party system sends it a ping. Those are the core steps to operationalizing a flow. It involves documenting the logic, troubleshooting errors, sharing it with your team, and triggering it to run automatically. Now, this doesn't mean that you'll never need to come back to this flow to make improvements or troubleshoot errors, but it does mean that you can trust this flow to run automatically so that you now have the bandwidth to go focus on automating other processes across the business. Now that you have all the skills required to build and operationalize a flow, in the last lesson, we'll give you a really actionable guide for how to select your first use case and ultimately start building that first flow.